Welcome to the Black Enterprise Black Men Excel virtual conference. Today's panel is Green Enterprise, Creating Wealth in Cannabis. I'm your moderator, Andrew Farrior, Managing Partner of Digital Venture Partners. And today I have with me two gentlemen who I have the pleasure of saying I have a business and a personal relationship with, Sam Ellis of Scout Ventures and Smoke Dizza of the Smokers Club. These two gentlemen were able to create wealth in the same industry in entirely different ways. So I was excited to bring you both in to get your shared perspective. We'll start with Smoke Dizza. I would love for you to give us a quick background on how you came together with the Smokers Club and how you were able to create a brand that exists outside of just cannabis, but more of lifestyle, music, and being culture focused for Black people.
Well, like you said, I go by the name of Smoke Dizza from Harlem, New York. I'm one of the founders and creators of the Smokers Club, lifestyle, cannabis, festival. We started in 2009 in South by Southwest as just a tour. And obviously, marijuana is our lifestyle. So we merged it. And 10 years later, we happen to have a license to actually have our own tree and dispensaries. So, it started with an idea, then it ended up in a dispensary. And, now we have a whole festival that we do every year. Some of the biggest acts in the world, along with myself. And, we just hustle from the ground up.
That's beautiful. I'm excited to touch back on that as we get more into the conversation. Before we do that, I want to introduce my close friend, Sam Ellis, a partner at Scout Ventures, amongst other entities, a technical co-founder at Dutchie, the well-renowned software company that exists in cannabis. Sam, I'd love for you to give our viewers an idea of kind of what was that moment that you decided to contribute your skills to the cannabis space?
Sure. Yeah, I actually ended up landing there through more of a focus on the people side of the business than really the industry side of the business. But I eventually grew to really grow a love for the industry, and especially as it was in a burgeoning time back in 2016, 2017. So, met awesome entrepreneurs, Ross and Zach Lipson, also from the Detroit area, which is really cool and special too, to have founders that grew up together, didn't know each other growing up. But I think these guys, they're world-class entrepreneurs, right? And I think in our generation, they were born and bred to be some of the best. And I really focused on, hey, how can I come in and contribute, set up kind of the competitive advantages of being able to work hard and be an early stage software founder, and link up with some guys who are killers and entrepreneurs. And Ross had come off a background in online ordering and delivery. He also had a background in cannabis space. Somewhat unofficially, as with most people, but ended up linking up with him, and both of them wanted to say, hey, we want to take on online ordering, broader e-com for the cannabis world. And I think it made a ton of sense, in terms of where the industry was at, what we could deliver with the software utility and tooling, and be able to create kind of like scalable value in a space that was really, I think, on the verge of exploding.
Right, and Dizza, when you came into the space, you staked your claim on being pro-cannabis over a decade ago, when it was not as attractive and it was not as revered as it is today. Over the past 10 years, kind of as a cultural tentpole in cannabis in America, how have you seen the industry developing and the stigma around it from a professional level?
Well, from a professional level, I feel like once we got white label, everybody took us a little more serious. But the real turning curve came from it being legalized and decriminalized in New York City, which was really, it was really something I never thought I would see happen in my 37 years of living. But I think that actually, that was definitely the curve, and that actually was, that was the point where we knew we could do it for real on the East Coast. Because basically I don't want to say we infiltrated the West Coast, but being a marijuana brand from the East Coast, it wasn't too many things that we can do on the East Coast to activate on the marijuana side, right? So going to the West Coast was definitely our way in, but having it, having that change in New York City, it leaves room for a whole lot of other growth. So I
Right.
would say that was the curve for me.
And Sam, being that you're a huge component, a New York resident and a huge component of hip hop culture, kind of what's been your experience seeing it develop in that market over the past decade?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think we always had, I think Dutchy broadly, I think we individually always had our eyes on some of these huge markets around big cities, right? You know, we ended up having, and I think kind of an interesting anecdote that really helps capture the excitement around a big city like New York. There was one dispensary that we saw that was just absolutely smashing. Like it was doing like 2-3x in terms of average order volume per average order value uh, per this dispensary versus anyone else in the state. And it was because it was like the closest legal dispensary to Boston, right? And so that was like the first time you really got to see the effect of like a big city show up and that demand. And like the demand's there. You know, the demand's been there, right? Especially in a city like New York, right? That's like very forward leaning and progressive. And there is a lot of good hip hop culture. And I think for the most part, there's people who are super interested in the culture, people who are super interested in the plant and medicinal aspects. There's just all different, there's all different types of people who are really focused on seeing cannabis land in New York and be successful. I think you saw some of the early medical stuff really pick up some steam, but now we're getting ready to, I think, turn the corner and see really the next generation of what it looks like to be operating cannabis businesses in a huge city, right? Where consumerism and culture are a huge part of the melting pot and will be part of the momentum and success. So yeah, I've kept tabs on it. I'd say in summary, it's a lot of excitement and it's like coming to fruition now, and it's like super fun to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Dizza, I think you exist in a place now where a lot of brands and entertainers have attempted to come and fall short. What I mean by that is we've seen several rappers and influencers and celebrities try to create a brand in cannabis. Most of them didn't do as well as I think they anticipated. But with the Smokers Club is a true legacy brand. It's a component of our culture. It is integrated in the conversation of cannabis and rap music. How did you get it to that point, and kind of what advice would you give to other cultural enthusiasts who want to create cannabis brands that are important?
I would say know your brand. Um, and that was one thing for us that we really targeted, just understanding our demo, understanding our brand, and just knowing what we bring to the table. So I mean, for me, I would say, studying the market, really knowing what's going on. And really, inserting myself when I seen fit to do that, and collaborating with other people in that world that was ahead of me, and really just being a student of the game, like if you don't understand what's going on with the culture, then you can't really make a mark with it, So it was a lot of studying. It was a lot of, really just surfacing the landscape and seeing what's what. But I would say that and the consistency with staying on top of it, because a lot of people have short short attention spans. So to really gauge it and tie the marijuana with the music was really our curve in getting over it, as far as the festival thing goes and the merch and really, bridging the gap with all of those things combined. So that was how we stayed on top of it.
Right. And Sam, to the points that Dizza made, when I met you, you were able to give me a lot of valuable insight on how maybe I was not looking at the industry in its entirety through data, through software, through the future of just applied technology. What has been your experience figuring out how to apply your expertise into the cannabis space in those fields?
Totally. Yeah. So I think there's a really interesting renaissance that happens in any industry that's very operationally rigorous and intensive and closer to a commodity, right? I think there's a lot of room for, I think what a lot of people say is kind of like the picks and shovels. So when we talk about the green rush, I think I look at software technology and data as a lot of like the picks and shovels, right? So I think it's really worthwhile to invest in, because, or really invest in terms of an entrepreneur, or really as an investor in the private markets, because you have a chance to actually influence the growth of a space in a scalable and kind of sustainable way. And I think that's really what the biggest advantage, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective, brings to bear of being on the more technology side, right? Is like, you're able to help and add value in a scalable way, right? And I think with the general field of data and insights in cannabis, I mean, a lot of people don't really realize how many products are out there, especially from the dispensary owner's point of view. It can be tremendously overwhelming to try and understand, like, all right, how do we reach our customers? What kind of segmentation do we need to be doing? How do we understand what products are moving well? How do we actually facilitate a really amazing experience for customers to order online or order in store and be super efficient, right? And I think like technology and data are really what enable all these things that really add a lot of upside to the green rush, right? I think add a lot of upside to the industry and space, and anyone in it looking to lean into whatever advantage they can get. I think technology is a super suitable one in that way.
The thing I love about talking to you, Sam, is like you constantly remind me that you're always the smartest person in the room. I'm like, if I can remember 10% of this, I'm gonna be all right. But,
no, that's not my goal. My goal is not to be the smartest person in the room. Only the most helpful person in the room and the biggest homie. That's right. That's the goal. That's the focus.
Right. And
we got a lot of competition on this. A lot of big homie vibes on the call.
No, this is definitely the biggest homie out of everybody. But to that point, I think a lot of people come into the space legally and they expect to operate how you do in the legacy market, in the sense of like you just buy a certain amount of flower, you sell it, and you create a profit. But legally, as you both know, there are a lot of fees, regulatory costs, taxes that come along with operating, just selling flower. The margins are not what people expect when they come into the space, but you've been able to diversify the Smokers Club brand to monetize in so many different avenues, which I think the wise man would try to emulate if he knew. How did that come about? How did you know to implement the Smokers Club in so many different ways?
Like I said, studying your brand and really being consistent and forcing it in people's faces, but tastefully. So it was always a different way to skin a cat. Like I said, we started with a tour that turned into a festival. The merchandise always was on the landscape of what we was doing, and the marijuana was always connected to it, but we just couldn't find a tangible way to do it without getting in trouble, or do it and make it, not even without getting in trouble, do it to be able to monetize off of it on a legal market. So I mean, right now with marijuana, a lot of things is focused on bags. So it all goes back to marketing, and it all goes back to merchandise, and just understanding what works in our demo, understanding what doesn't work in our demo. So for us, it was really just, like I said, understanding our brand, and I feel like any brand that wants to get off the ground and get to the next level, if you don't understand your brand, it won't ever work. So for us, understanding our brand and knowing what worked in our space, that's how we got to the next level.
Right. And touching on that, Sam, I would love for you to give our viewers a top line idea of what Dutchie is, how you got involved, because that's kind of your claim to fame for many people in the cannabis space, on what you were able to do with a company that's become so immense and so valuable, with you being one of the early architects of the space. So I would love for you to kind of give a backstory of Dutchie, how you got involved, and what was your place there.
Sure. Yeah. So again, this is I really backed my way into the cannabis space by the people, right? So my co-founders, I mean, amazing, awesome entrepreneurs, and we had set up shop in Oregon, and we originally started being very focused on delivery. That's what we had seen work in some of the industries with food, and based on Ross' experience. And I mean, that adds value, certainly, like the like delivery of cannabis. But for us, we slowly learned that the industry was mired with regulatory issues, right? And really hampered by a couple of these additional manifest files and insurance files, and like all of these challenges that I think prevent a really smooth and seamless delivery operation. And again, we were strictly software companies, so we weren't trying to touch too much of the logistics. But for us, we were we were super focused on the dispensary early, right? Like how do, I mean, to talk about like customer obsession, like that was very much a part of the culture early, right? Early, especially amongst the founders, right? Just like obsessed with driving value to the dispensary owner, understanding their needs, understanding how to build product to them, understanding how to make the online ordering ecosystem in cannabis as easy and seamless as possible. And I think, I think the selling point is relatively straightforward for a lot of dispensaries, especially when you build the features and functionality that they need, right? So for them, it's like, hey, you can't be missing the online orders, right? That's easy buckets, right? Like you have. And so for us, we're just like, hey, we're going to build the tooling and build the software for you to make it super smooth and easy to integrate your menu with whatever point of sale you're using and allow customers to facilitate online orders. And we were really big on kind of the embedded menu into websites, and even earlier on, we're helping people craft their web and marketing strategy, oftentimes under the guise or with the kind of ancillary benefit of improving online ordering, right? So oftentimes what we did was saying, hey, what's good for you is good for us, because we want you to have usage in the software. We want you to do more orders, right? So we're really focused on like how can we build the tooling and build the software in kind of a scalable and sophisticated way to allow people to super seamlessly conduct online ordering, and then how can we also help empower people to move through more online orders, right? And it's kind of this cycle of like the more we learn, the more customers we have show up, more dispensaries that are happy, and then the more features that they need in order to service their people even better, right? So you look at some of these things that we eventually grew to do, like I think the company went on a little bit after my tenure to work on something like Dutchie Plus, which is more of an enterprise focus, right? So allowing super large multi-state operators to really like actually build customized, amazing online ordering experiences, where Dutchie does a lot of the powering behind the scenes, right? And like some really nice custom messaging features. So it's been this saga of like, how do we improve the dispensary owner's ability to really move their product in an online ecosystem, right? And so now, as you look at in this kind of new era of Dutchie, and it's always been a marketplace, but there's much more focus on kind of a larger consumer picture and larger like, hey, we have a little bit more momentum on the brand now that like I think the company has gone on to really focus on having a lot of capital on the balance sheet and being able to make a big push to consumer, which will be really exciting to see, and see the marketplace really fill out, and still continue to, of course, to drive like where really core intent has always been is to drive value to the dispensary owner, right? So it's been really fun to be part of that early origin, to build the first version of the online ordering software and help kind of get the initial engineering team build, and go on and after my tenure there, see the company continue to do super well, and it's just been awesome.
Right. And one more thing I would love to follow up with you on is being that you're an investor and Black people have this issue finding capital in this space, like what top line advice would you give to a Black entrepreneur who maybe has an idea of how to insert themselves in cannabis, but they're not well capitalized yet, how they position themselves to get there?
Totally. I think this is, Black entrepreneurs in particular, because it's oftentimes a barrier to entry of the knowledge, right? Like a lot of the stuff is like raising capital and starting businesses. Like a lot of it's not that deep, but it's like the knowledge is often sometimes esoteric and like almost I want to say hidden, but it's like not easily or readily available or easily to filter the signal from all the noise, right? So I think on the fundraising front, you have to remember that fundraising is effectively a high ticket, long sales cycle sales effort, right? So if you don't understand that that's kind of the environment you're operating in, that's what you're dealing with, then that's like the first thing to understand. Two is like you have to understand that the investor is really the kind of the person you're selling to, and that they have some set of needs and requirements as well, right? So like investors they're not bad people. If they see a good deal that fits their criteria, then it's like awesome. Like we'll do the deal and back the person, right? I think the challenge is though. The challenge, I think, for a lot of Black entrepreneurs is having the network to build the relationships in order to like understand what investors in the space want, as well as actually being able to get ahead of relationships early, right? So being able to actually get on someone's radar before you even need capital when you're in the ideas phase, just based off your relationship or based off network, right? Because the more you can allow someone to get to know, more you can allow an investor to get to know you and your spirit as an entrepreneur, right? Which like I think, just the reality of the matter is like, I think many Black entrepreneurs, especially in the cannabis space, they're I think so much more like gritty and tied into the culture and like and really want to like build a business and like include the community, right? There's like, I think there's beauty to that. And if you don't allow yourself to be in a position where you can allow a prospective investor to get to know you and see that, then it's just way harder, right? It's way, if you're showing up like when you actually need capital, right? Before you really go through this relationship building cycle, right? Which is like, important and ideal. Sometimes it's not feasible to do, but I think for the most part, if you're able to actually like avoid this whole, hey, we're pressing, we need capital now, like, I think it's just, it's hard to raise fund. It's hard to raise funds in that context because you oftentimes don't have the relationship yet, and you're on the wrong side of the leverage curve, right? Like when you actually need the money and you're doing a negotiation, like anytime that happens, right? Like you don't have as much juice, right? So I mean, really, what you want to do is be able to like be super focused on networking, meeting people like Andrew who are like super well connected in the space and know other investors, and can say like, hey, I know you're like just getting going, but like talk to a couple people, talk to a couple investors, and like ask what they're thinking about and what they need. Like, what would you need to do a deal? Like, what would you need to do to invest into me so you understand, right? Because I mean, it's just like Dizzo was saying earlier, like you got to understand what the people want. It's not deeper than that, and any investors, it's the same stuff, right? You just like, on the business side, it's like, all right, how do I understand the culture and what the people want, the products and the brand? How do I understand line? Like when you're going to align with an investor, like, you have to have those conversations. Like I guarantee Dizzo has talked to probably like thousands of people about like the culture and like what strains are hot and like what you like, and like it's the same stuff. If you're starting to try and like raise capital from investors that's serious, it's like, right, well, how much time have you spent really trying to understand what they actually want? That's super important, right? And right. I get that it's oftentimes a network barrier to entry, right? But like, I think there are people out there who are like willing to help and like, hey, I'll throw the needle and you can like talk to this investor just for early days, right? I think that's kind of the biggest focal point.
Right. I agree 100%. I also appreciate the shout out. I am well connected and I appreciate that.
100%. It's from hustling though. You know what I mean? You weren't born well connected.
Right.
It's from messaging people. It's from taking calls. It's from asking. It's from providing. It's from giving. Right. It's like building a good network. Like that's hustle.
Right. Exactly.
100%.
I think that's like more valuable. Hustle. It's more valuable than the capital in your pocket. Also, and I actually that was my next question with Dizza. I would love to kind of get your perspective because, as Sam said, I think you and probably Currency know more about the temperature and climate of the public's relationship with cannabis over the last decade, because you've literally toured the country and the world championing this plant before everybody else was doing it. So like, how have you seen when you go to these different parts of the country over the past 10 years, how has it kind of changed to where are they more accepting of, cannabis in a venue or talking about it or going to an event that's centered around cannabis? What's kind of been your growth that you've seen?
Well, I could even speak about my experience right now. Like right now I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, right? And marijuana is still taboo out here, right? But every place isn't like that. The change that I seen, I think, when I first started touring and just being bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just like, enjoying myself around the world, smoking marijuana, finding where it's at, knowing what's good, what's bad. I used to have this thing where I thought Amsterdam had the best weed in the world until I went to California for real, right? And it's the same, but it's completely different as far as, the consumption and what people like. Some people might just like sativa, and then there's just some people that just like indica, but a lot of people don't know how to articulate that. They don't know what they're smoking. They don't know what they're doing. So for, like you said, Drew, like me and Spitter, we students of the game and we are a part of the culture as well as the influences in the culture. So we know what sucks already. And we already have a real broadened opinion on how we feel. It's a very strong opinion, rather, to how we feel about stuff. And really our general consensus is really how the kids feel, and really having little homies that we talk to and listen to, because you can talk to everybody, but if you're not listening, then there's no comprehension. So, right. And even in the market, I'm not per se doing what I like. because what I like might not be what Sam like or what you like, Drew. It just might not correlate. But I can't go against what the majority of the people like. So even if I don't like it, I gotta take my feelings away from it and really just cater to the people. And I think this is my punchline for this seminar is know your brand, understand your brand, and understand what's going on outside of your brand. Because again, it sounds so cliche and it's so simple, but that's the way to get ahead. The comprehension and understanding what's going on out here. So
Great. And I appreciate both of you gentlemen. I want to get a few parting words from both of you. I'll start with Sam. You know, in particular, you were someone I revere because you came into the space and you figured out how to create wealth for yourself without touching the plant at all. You understood that it's an ecosystem, and as long as you provide value somewhere within that ecosystem, you can benefit, right? So what advice would you give for Black people to kind of maybe explore ancillary opportunities that don't directly touch the plant?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a really important point about value and wealth creation. Those two are very closely linked. I think for looking into an ancillary side of the business, the biggest advantage is scale, right? If you're thinking about wealth creation in general or value creation, there's a couple like key levers, right? And this speaks true in the cannabis industry, but also more broadly, right? So you have this notion of like competitive advantage, right? It's like what are you better at than everyone else, right? So it's like maybe you have a world-class understanding of the brand and culture and people, right? And if that's like, or maybe you have a world-class understanding of like how to build software or how to build into a particular ecosystem. And I think for the scale part, that's like why software is interesting, or why ancillary things are interesting with data, is because it just, you're not touching it digits, right? It's much more scalable. I think the third lever is like risk, right? So it's like, how can I build a vehicle that is able to take in capital and really leverage scale and competitive advantage with a little bit more pace from the capital, right? So that's also a little bit more, I think, appealing to investors because the margins are a little bit higher, the top line's a little bit higher. So it's a little bit easier also to take on risk, right? So I think the combination of those things are really what makes the ancillary side of cannabis early in the industry very attractive from kind of a value and wealth creation perspective.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I got in on the ancillary part as far as like content and marketing because I couldn't afford to apply for a license. So I'm in the same boat as you. But Dizza, I would love for you to give our viewers an idea of, what you have in store for the Smokers Club, maybe going into 2022, or some of the things you're excited about. My favorite aspect of the Smokers Club is the merch. So I would love for you to give us an idea of just what they can look forward to in 2022.
Well, we just released some new merch actually. Any fan of me knows that I love Ralph Lauren rugby, and we finally made our own Smokers Club rugby, cut and sew. So I feel like graduating from the street market kind of wear to cut and sew is the next thing on the merch side for Smokers Club. Our festival is coming back in San Bernardino next year. Got a huge lineup. It's probably going to be another 2-day festival. What else with Smokers Club? Smokers Club Records. We have that too. We're putting projects out underneath the flagship, and hopefully we'll have the Smokers Club dispensary open next year. And hopefully we could jumpstart our New York voyage over on the East Coast with having our license and being able to have our tree surface on the East. We're doing very well on the West Coast in every dispensary, every Cookies, Marathon store, Shabrinsky, XYZ. And we just staying on top of the culture and knowing exactly what's going on, and getting back into the space after the pandemic, even though it still very much exists. So we all still learning how to move in the stratosphere out here. So, everybody's excited though.
No, I'm excited for both of you gentlemen. I genuinely appreciate y'all taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge and experience with fellow Black entrepreneurs. And I hope that they can take something from this conversation and apply it to their journey in cannabis. And hopefully we all can meet and collaborate and do business together.
Yes.
100%.
Well, that does it for our 2021 Black Men Excel Summit. We hope you got what you came for and more. Don't forget that if you registered on blackenterprise.com, you have access to all BMXL sessions on demand for the next 30 days. So you can go back and catch it all. And brothers, let the women of power in your lives know that we are back to doing it for the ladies. First up, our very first Sisters Inc. Summit for Black women entrepreneurs on December 7th, followed by our Getting a Seat at the Table virtual town hall on December 15th, which you can watch on blackenterprise.com and Fox Soul. And the ladies are finally getting together in person again in Las Vegas at the Women of Power Summit in March. Registration is now open at blackenterprise.com/Women of Power Summit. Thanks for spending time in fellowship with us over the past 2 days. And thanks again to all of our speakers, coaches, and sponsors, especially title sponsor FedEx. And if you're hungry for more, join me for an exclusive live mentorship mastermind meetup right after this. In the meantime, stay safe and stay well, and always remember, Black men excel.